His lawyer leaned over and whispered 5 words. Just 5 quiet words, and Vincent's face went pale. That smug, cocky look I'd seen every morning for 15 years drained right out of him. His hands started to shake. The divorce papers he'd been so eager to sign were rattling like dry leaves in the wind. And me? For the first time in 3 years I smiled. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to hear how we got here. How a woman everyone thought had lost it pulled off the longest, quietest game of her life. I'm Alexis Dunst. I'm 34. And up until 3 months ago, I was married to Vincent Mercer. 15 years. That's longer than most celebrity marriages, longer than a few countries have even been around, and definitely longer than my patience should have lasted. But I'm stubborn. Got that from my grandma. I met Vincent when I was 17. I'd finished high school early, not because I was some prodigy, but because I was practical, driven, and desperate to get out of my parents' house. I landed a job at Henderson & Price law firm as a file clerk. Minimum wage, constant paper cuts, but it was mine. By 18, I'd worked my way up to legal assistant. I had a good head for details, numbers, and keeping quiet while paying attention. Vincent was 24 when I met him at a client event, charming, ambitious, full of big plans to build a real estate empire. He talked about the future like it already belonged to him, like success was just waiting for him to show up. He told me he was going to build something amazing. I joked that I'd help him file the permits. Romantic, right? We got married when I was 19. Tyler was born when I was 20. I stayed on part-time at the firm while raising our son, stashing away every spare dollar into my 401k. My grandma used to say a woman should always have her own money. Not secret money, she'd say, just money that's hers. Something no one can touch. By the time I was 23, Vincent's business finally took off. He asked me to leave the law firm and work for him full-time. He needed someone he trusted to handle the books, deal with clients, keep things running. So, I became his everything, unpaid of course. I was the bookkeeper, office manager, client handler, model home decorator, marketing planner, event coordinator. I juggled it all, plus raising Tyler, running our house, and making sure everyone got fed and didn't kill each other. Officially, I was the wife. Unofficially, I was the whole damn operation. For 11 years, I gave everything I had to help Vincent chase his dream. And for 11 years, he got all the praise, the press, the pats on the back. At events, I was just Vincent's wife. At speeches, he thanked his team, his mentors, his vision, but somehow never mentioned me. Then things started to change. He stopped talking things over with me. He started coming home later and later. Started nitpicking, my clothes, my cooking, my so-called lack of ambition. Lack of ambition. I was running the whole back end of his business for free while raising his kid and managing his entire life. But sure, I wasn't ambitious enough. Then, 3 months ago, he dropped the bomb. It was a Tuesday. I was in the kitchen making his favorite dinner, because apparently I'm addicted to thankless tasks. He sat down at the table with this cold, professional look. I want a divorce, he said. Then, I want the house, the cars, the business. Everything. You can keep Tyler. He said it like he was placing an order. Like, I'll take the assets, hold the kid. Thanks. Keep Tyler. Like our 15-year-old son was a leftover slice of pizza. Like he was doing me a favor by letting me have the burden. I just stared at him. 15 years of marriage, and that's how it ended. At our kitchen table, right between the salt shaker and the butter dish. Like I was just another thing he'd decided to toss out. What I didn't realize at the time, what I wouldn't learn until much later, was that Vincent had been planning this for months. He already had a lawyer lined up. Harold Whitfield. Top-tier, high-priced, and ruthless. While I was busy prepping meals and making his dentist appointments, he was crafting his exit plan. I'd been blindsided by a man I trusted with everything. The very next day, his mother showed up. Lorraine Mercer. For 15 years, she'd treated me like I was the live-in help. Now she waltzed in with her perfect hair and that phony, practiced look of concern. She took my hand, gave me a little pat, and said, "You should have tried harder to keep him happy." Then she added, "Men have needs, dear." Like she was explaining rocket science to a toddler. Lorraine giving marriage advice was always rich, considering her own husband practically lived at the golf course just to avoid being near her. But sure, somehow I was the one who failed. That first week felt like I was underwater. Vincent moved me into the guest room. He had legal documents ready to go, settlement proposals, schedules, everything already prepared. It was all happening so fast I could barely breathe. To everyone else, I probably looked like a woman whose world had just come crashing down. A loyal wife discarded after years of sacrifice. A heartbroken victim who never saw it coming. But here's the thing Vincent didn't know, what nobody knew. 3 years earlier I'd found something. Buried deep in his financial records. Something he thought he'd buried for good. And from that day on, I'd been quietly, methodically getting ready. But hold that thought for a second. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one of them. Seriously. Now back to the wreckage. Within a week of that kitchen table ambush, Vincent had taken over everything. The guest room wasn't temporary anymore. It was my new home inside the house I helped build. My closet space got cut down from a walk-in to 2 tiny sections, which he so generously allowed me to keep. The message was loud and clear. This isn't your house anymore. And then came her dash. 2 weeks in, he started bringing her around. Brittany Sawyer, 27, worked at his company. Of course she did. She had that polished, Instagram-perfect vibe, blonde highlights, flawless nails, those high-end yoga pants that probably cost more than my whole grocery run. She walked into my kitchen like she owned the place. She wore my apron, my grandmother's apron, while making smoothies in my blender like it was hers. She was younger than my marriage. Hell, younger than my favorite handbag. But apparently her smoothies were amazing, so I guess that made it all okay. Vincent showed her off like she was a prize he'd won. They'd lounge on my couch, watch my shows, eat off my dishes. He'd throw his arm around her in front of me like I was a lamp or a coffee table, just part of the scenery. Every day brought a fresh humiliation. First, he canceled my personal credit card. We need to separate finances, he said, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. Then he killed the joint card. Next, he suggested, ever so politely, that maybe I should start looking for somewhere else to stay while we sort this out. My own house. And I was being pushed out. Then Lorraine came by to help me pack. And by help, I mean she sifted through my things and decided what I was allowed to take. Old clothes? Sure. Some family photos? Fine. My grandmother's recipe box? She paused like she might keep that one for herself. What I wasn't allowed to take. Any jewelry Vincent had given me in the last 15 years. Any furniture I'd picked out. Anything that might actually be worth something. Those are marital assets, Lorraine said in her syrupy voice. And Vincent is entitled to them. She stuffed my things into garbage bags. Not boxes, garbage bags. Like I was trash being hauled out to the curb. Through it all, there was one person I thought I could count on. Diane Holloway. We'd been friends since high school. 20 years of shared boyfriends, breakups, babies, and everything life threw at us. Diane was the first person I called after Vincent dropped the news. She was right there, supportive, always checking in, always asking how I was doing. Always ready with a bottle of wine and a shoulder to cry on. She kept telling me I deserved better. That Vincent was throwing everything away and making the biggest mistake of his life. But something didn't sit right. It was subtle at first, little things. Somehow, Vincent always seemed to be a step ahead. I told Diane I was thinking about fighting for the house, and the very next day, Tyler came home saying, "Dad says that's not gonna work." When I mentioned I'd been looking at apartments in a certain neighborhood, Vincent made an offhand remark about that exact area being too pricey for me. That's when it clicked. Looking back, I should have seen it years ago. The way Diane would light up when Vincent walked into a room. The way she complimented him a little too often. Laughed a little too loud at his jokes. She always asked about him first. How's Vincent? How's the business? Is Vincent happy? Diane had been carrying a torch for my husband for 15 years. And Vincent, because he treated attention like currency, knew it. He fed it. Made her feel special, like she wasn't just another face in the crowd. I'm sure he implied they'd end up together once the divorce was over. Probably dangled just enough hope to keep her loyal. My best friend, my ride or die for 20 years, was his spy. All that history, all those memories sold out for a few cheap compliments and the illusion of a maybe. At least ask for more than crumbs, Diane. But honestly, Vincent wasn't the worst part. Neither was Lorraine. Not even Diane. The hardest part, the part that truly broke me, was Tyler. My son saw it all. He saw the new girlfriend, saw his grandmother help pack up my life, saw his father look at me like I didn't matter. And day after day, Vincent whispered in his ear, "Poison slow and steady. Your mom's making this harder than it needs to be. I just want peace. She's the one dragging it out. I'm being fair. She's not cooperating." Tyler started pulling away. Not angry, just distant. Confused. Caught in the middle. He didn't know what to believe. And Vincent was smooth. Convincing. I could lose the house. The money. Everything I'd spent 15 years building. But that look in Tyler's eyes, the one that said maybe I was the problem, that was the real cut. That was the one that bled. So I hired a lawyer. Nina Castellano, recommended by my old firm. She was 52, sharp as a scalpel, and allergic to bullshit. She went through my case top to bottom, then looked me straight in the eye and said, "You helped build this business. You're entitled to half of everything. The house, the company, the accounts. We fight." I stared at her for a long second. What if I don't want to fight? I asked. Nina blinked like I just started speaking Swahili. Like I'd suggested we send Vincent a thank you card and a fruit basket. She thought I was broken, defeated, too numb to stand up for myself. She had no idea. I moved into a tiny apartment with Tyler. 2 bedrooms. 1 bathroom. A kitchen that was barely bigger than my old pantry. Half our stuff didn't even fit. We stacked boxes in the corner of his room like a sad little shrine to everything we'd lost. Meanwhile, Vincent was posting selfies with Brittany. New chapter. New energy. Blessed. And right underneath it, Lorraine commented, "So happy for you, sweetheart. You deserve joy." My sister called me absolutely livid. "You need a shark. Take him for every damn penny." Everyone had something to say. Everyone thought they knew what I should do. They all saw a woman who'd given up, who was being walked all over, who couldn't fight back. They were all wrong. Here's the thing about being underestimated: people stop watching you. They stop guarding their secrets. They get sloppy. And that's exactly when you learn everything you need to know. 3 years. That's how long I'd been carrying this secret. 3 years since I found out the truth about Vincent Mercer and his glittering, glamorous, totally fake empire. It all started on a random Tuesday night, 3 years before the divorce. Vincent was working late again. By that point, he was always working late, though I didn't yet know what that really meant. I was at home, knee-deep in the company books, reconciling accounts, doing the kind of tedious behind-the-scenes work that actually kept his business afloat. And then I spotted something odd. A transfer to an unfamiliar account. Then another. Then a pattern. Money was slipping out of our accounts, quietly, steadily, into places I'd never seen before. I stayed up until 3 a.m. chasing the trail. The deeper I went, the colder my blood ran. Vincent had been taking out loans against everything we owned. Our beautiful home, the one everyone complimented, was mortgaged to the brink. The original loan, $400,000. A second mortgage, $350,000, taken 4 years earlier. Then a third. Another $350,000, added 2 years ago. We owed $1.10 million on a house worth maybe $850,000. We weren't just in debt. We were $250,000 underwater on the house I thought we'd nearly paid off. But the business? The business was even worse. Lines of credit maxed out at $200,000. Back taxes, $85,000. Outstanding vendor payments, $120,000. Equipment loans, $75,000. The company Vincent bragged about at every event, the one he claimed was crushing it, was suffocating under nearly $500,000 in debt. Even the cars weren't real. All 3 were leased, and the balloon payments were coming due. We didn't own anything. We just had a very expensive lifestyle we couldn't afford. I sat there at the kitchen table surrounded by a sea of printouts doing the math. Total debt, around $1.9 million. Total assets, if I was being generous, maybe $1.6 million. We were in the red by at least $300,000, maybe more. But the biggest question was, where the hell had the money gone? So I kept digging. Over the next few weeks, I traced every transaction I could get my hands on. And the picture that came into focus was a punch to the gut. Cryptocurrency investments, $180,000 gone. Gambling losses. $75,000 gone. An apartment I'd never heard of. Rented for a woman I'd never heard of. Rent and furnishings. $60,000. Then there were the luxury expenses that never made it home. Designer watches, custom suits, vacations I was never invited on. Another $85,000. My husband wasn't building an empire. He was building a bonfire, out of borrowed cards all stacked and burning. We looked rich the way mannequins look alive, convincing from a distance but hollow up close. My first instinct was to confront him, to scream, cry, demand answers. But I knew Vincent. I watched him work people for years. If I called him out, he'd twist it, spin it, make me feel like I was losing my mind. He'd probably even blame me. And worse, if he realized I was onto him, he might try to get his hands on my own money. See, I'd always kept something separate. My grandmother's voice always in the back of my mind. A woman should have her own money. I had an IRA from my law firm days. I rolled it over when I left, but never touched it. It had grown to about $180,000. Legally mine. Earned from my job. Separate property. And then there was my grandmother herself. She passed away when I was 28. Left me $340,000 in her will. Very clearly marked. For Alexis only. I'd never mixed that money with Vincent's. Never used it for joint expenses. Never told him where it was. My grandmother kept her own account for 50 years. Not secret money, she'd say. Just mine. Smartest woman I've ever known. Altogether, I had about $520,000 that was fully legally and completely mine. So no, I didn't confront Vincent. I protected myself. I got my uncle involved, he's a retired accountant. And together we set up an irrevocable trust in Tyler's name. I put my IRA and my inheritance into that trust. I wasn't listed as a beneficiary. Vincent definitely wasn't either. It was for Tyler's future college, a first home, emergencies. And it was locked up tight. Then I documented everything. Every mortgage. Every shady account. Every suspicious transfer. I printed copies of every document and hid them like treasure. One set went to my sister's house. Another set got locked in a safe deposit box. The rest I backed up on an encrypted drive. I wasn't just covering my bases, I was building a fortress. Then I waited. I knew Vincent would leave eventually. Men like him always do. They get bored. They find someone younger. They convince themselves they deserve better. I just had to be ready when it happened. 3 years of waiting. 3 years of watching him dig the hole deeper. 3 years of smiling at cocktail parties while knowing our life was sinking into financial quicksand. I became an expert in patience. And an even better actress. Because while he was out there living his fake success story, I was quietly preparing for the day the bottom fell out. So when he finally asked for a divorce, when he sat me down and demanded the house, the cars, the business, honestly, I almost laughed in his face. He wasn't asking for assets. He was claiming ownership of the debt. He just didn't know it yet. Back in the present, I sat across from Nina Castellano and placed 3 thick binders on her desk. 3 years of proof. Every mortgage. Every line of credit. Every hidden account. Nina read in total silence for nearly an hour. When she finally looked up, her face had changed. The pity was gone. So was the concern. "You've known about this for 3 years?" she asked. I nodded. I was waiting for him to leave. And when he did, and demanded everything, he took on every last bit of debt. He just hasn't realized it yet. Nina leaned back in her chair. What replaced her worry was something else, something closer to awe. "So when you sign over the assets, I walk away clean," I said. "He gets the mortgages, the business loans, the car leases, everything becomes his responsibility. And your inheritance? Your retirement? Separate property," I said. "Never mixed. Legally protected. Sitting safe in a trust for Tyler." Nina was quiet for a beat. Then she smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. "Mrs. Dunst," she said, "I think I owe you an apology. I thought you'd given up." I smiled back. "Everyone thinks that. That's the point." In that moment, she stopped looking at me like a broken woman and started looking at me like a strategist. I liked that better. Chess Grandmaster has a better wardrobe anyway. The trap was already set. The math was ironclad. The paper trail was locked down. Now all I had to do was let Vincent believe he'd won. And no one plays the gracious loser better than a woman who's had 15 years of practice. The next 3 months were pure performance art. I became exactly what everyone expected. Broken, defeated, barely hanging on. I showed up to mediation looking exhausted, with red-rimmed eyes and shaking hands. I spoke softly, like a woman who'd had the fight drained out of her. During our second session, I whispered, "I'm not trying to be difficult. I just want enough to start over. I know the business is his life. I know how much the house means to him. I don't want to tear the family apart any more than it already is." I asked for $50,000 in cash, my personal things, and shared custody of Tyler. That was it. Vincent agreed instantly. He'd probably braced for war. Any decent lawyer would have told him I'd go after half of everything. Instead, I was begging for scraps. He looked at me like I was pitiful, like I was a wounded animal and he was doing me a kindness. I deserved an Oscar, or at least a Golden Globe. This was the role of a lifetime, and my only audience was my lying, cheating, soon-to-be bankrupt ex-husband. With each passing week, his ego swelled. He stopped being cautious, stopped pretending to be civil. He started bragging to anyone who'd listen. "She didn't even fight," he told his golf buddies. "I gave her a fair offer, and she took it without a peep." Lorraine was worse. She bragged at her book club, at church, at every social event. "Vincent's keeping everything," she told them. "She didn't get a dime," Lorraine bragged. "I always knew she wasn't strong enough for my son." To celebrate his so-called win, Vincent bought himself a new watch, $15,000. I know because I saw the charge on the business account. Yep, still using company money for personal splurges. Still digging that financial grave with gold-plated shovels. He made sure to wear it to our next mediation. Rolled up his sleeve just enough so I'd notice. Classy. He also took Brittany to La Maison, the same overpriced French place where we celebrated our 10th anniversary. He posted the pictures online like a teenager showing off his prom date. "Life is good when you're with the right person." The caption read, "The right person," meaning the one who hadn't seen the financial disaster he was hiding yet. Meanwhile, back at my house, Brittany was redecorating. New furniture in the living room, new art on the walls, and worst of all, she painted my kitchen gray. She painted over my sage green. I spent 3 weeks choosing that color. Weeks of samples taped to the walls, adjusting for different lighting, obsessing over undertones, trying to get it just right. She covered it with builder-grade gray. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. Gray just like her personality. And just like the future she's walking into once she finds out Vincent is broke. Honestly, the color choice was kind of perfect. Meanwhile, Diane kept calling, still pretending to be a concerned friend, fishing for updates in her syrupy voice. "How are you holding up?" she'd ask, all sweetness and faux sympathy. "I just want it to be over," I'd say, letting my voice crack just enough. "I don't have the energy to fight anymore." Like clockwork, Vincent would find out within hours. I could practically hear him exhale through the walls, letting his guard drop a little more each time. Diane thought she was playing me. Really, she was just acting as a glorified messaging app. One that didn't even charge a subscription. But while the grown-ups were tangled up in their games, Tyler was paying attention. My son, sharp, thoughtful, observant, started noticing things that didn't add up. He saw the new $15,000 watch on his dad's wrist. Then heard Vincent say he couldn't afford the school trip to DC. He watched as Brittany's shopping bags piled up in the hallway. Then listened to Vincent complain about tight finances. The math wasn't matching, as they say. One night, Tyler came over to my tiny apartment, sat down at our second-hand kitchen table, his face serious. He's got his dad's eyes, but what he's got that Vincent lost a long time ago is honesty. "Mom," he said quietly, "is Dad actually rich?" I looked at him for a long time. "What do you think?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I think something's not right. I think he's pretending." I reached across the table and held his hand. "Trust me," I said. "Just wait a little longer." My 15-year-old figured it out before 2 lawyers and a CPA did. Honestly, I should bill his college fund for consulting. Behind the scenes, Nina was lining up every detail of our legal strategy like a surgeon prepping for a high-stakes operation. The divorce agreement was simple on the surface. I was walking away. No claims to marital property. The house, the business, the vehicles, everything would go to Vincent. In exchange, I'd take my modest cash settlement and walk. But attached to that agreement was a little something extra. An addendum. A detailed liability disclosure statement. Every single debt. Every mortgage. Every loan. Every lease. Laid out line by line. So when Vincent signed for the assets, he was also legally assuming every bit of the liability. The mortgages? His. The business debt? His. The balloon payments on the leased cars? All his. It was clean, precise, and absolutely brutal. Legal documents are like poetry, Nina told me once. Boring, expensive poetry that can ruin someone's life. My favorite kind. 2 weeks before our final court date, Harold Whitfield, Vincent's high-priced attorney, called Nina with a tone full of caution. "My client is assuming significant assets," he said carefully. "I'd like to request a full financial audit before we finalize." "Just to verify everything," Nina said calmly, keeping her voice neutral. "We'll provide whatever documentation you need." But when Harold brought it up to Vincent, my soon-to-be ex shut it down on the spot. "No audits," Vincent snapped. "I built that company. I know exactly what it's worth. I'm not paying some accountant to tell me what I already know." Harold pushed back. "I strongly recommend we verify asset values before you sign. This is significant." Vincent cut him off mid-sentence. "Brittany wants this done. I want this done. No more delays." Harold had been practicing law for over 30 years. He knew exactly what this was. A client charging full speed into a bad decision. But he also knew the rule. You can't force someone to take advice. So he drafted a waiver. A document stating that he had advised a full financial review, and that Vincent was declining it, against counsel's recommendation. Vincent didn't even read it. Just signed it with a flourish. Same way he'd signed every other document. No reading, no questions, just arrogance and a deadline. Never underestimate what an impatient girlfriend can do to a man's attention span. Brittany, as it turned out, was worth millions to me. That night, the night before the final hearing, Vincent texted me. "Thank you for not making this ugly." I stared at that message for a long time. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of helping him build his business, raise his son, run his life. And he was thanking me for not inconveniencing him while he tossed me aside. I typed back. "I just want what's best for Tyler." And I meant it. What was best for Tyler was already locked in. A trust fund, a future secured, and a dad who was about to learn the costliest lesson of his life. That evening, Nina called. Thursday, 9 a.m. final hearing. Judge Patricia Holden. "You ready?" I looked around my little apartment. The second-hand furniture. The unpacked boxes. My tiny sage green kitchen, the one color I'd picked just for me, because it reminded me of hope. "I've been ready for 3 years," I said. 3 years of planning, of waiting, of watching. It was finally here. I felt like a kid on Christmas morning. If Christmas came with court dates and financial justice. Thursday, 9 a.m., Vincent would walk into that courtroom thinking he was there to claim victory. He had no idea he was about to inherit a financial avalanche, one he had demanded, signed for, and sealed with witnesses. And the best part? He asked for it. In writing. If you've made it this far, you already know something satisfying is about to go down. Hit that like button if you're ready for Vincent to get exactly what he deserves. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead. I've got more stories like this waiting for you. Now let's finish it. Thursday, April 17th. 9 a.m. Courtroom 4B. I remember every detail. The way sunlight spilled through the tall windows. The scent of old wood and floor polish. The quiet hum of lawyers flipping pages and whispering strategy. This was the place where 15 years of marriage would end, and 3 years of patience would finally cash out. Vincent got there first, of course. Wearing his best suit, the charcoal Armani I helped him pick out for a client dinner 3 years ago. His new watch caught the light when he shook Harold's hand. He looked calm, confident. Like a man seconds away from closing the deal of a lifetime. Brittany was outside in the hallway. She wasn't allowed inside. but she still showed up for support. I saw her through the door. Flawless makeup, designer handbag, scrolling her phone like this was just another spa appointment. Lorraine was there too, seated in the gallery. She dressed up for the occasion, probably planning to take Vincent to lunch afterward to celebrate his win. When I walked in, she gave me a smile. Not a kind one. The kind of smile you give someone who already lost. I walked in a few minutes after Vincent. Simple navy dress. No jewelry. Hair pulled back in a low bun. I looked exhausted. Beaten down. Like a woman with nothing left. Perfect. I looked like a woman who'd given up on life and fashion at the same time. Very convincing. Honestly, I should teach acting classes. Then Judge Patricia Holden entered, and the courtroom rose. She was in her early 60s, silver hair pulled back, reading glasses perched at the tip of her nose. 30 years on the family court bench. She'd seen every scam, every sob story, every bitter low-blow divorcing couples could throw at each other. Nothing rattled her. She reviewed the case file briefly, then looked up. Mercer versus Mercer. Final dissolution hearing. I understand the parties have reached an agreement. Harold stood first. Yes, Your Honor. My client Vincent Mercer is assuming all marital assets, including the family home, the real estate development company, and all associated vehicles. In return, Mrs. Dunst receives a $50,000 cash settlement. Nina stood beside me. That's correct, Your Honor. My client agrees to relinquish all claims to these assets and accepts the settlement as stated. Judge Holden turned her gaze to me. She studied my face. She was looking for it, some sign I was being forced into a bad deal. Mrs. Dunst, she said gently, I need to confirm that you understand what you're agreeing to today. You're giving up your rights to significant property, the house, the business you helped build. Are you absolutely sure this is what you want? I kept my voice soft, just a little shaky. Yes, Your Honor. I understand. And you're entering this agreement voluntarily? No pressure from anyone. No, Your Honor. I glanced down at my hands, then looked back up. I just want my husband to have everything he asked for. I want this to be over. She stared at me for a moment longer. I could practically hear her debating whether to step in, to delay, to stop what looked like a disaster in motion. But I had legal representation. I was answering clearly. I was an adult making my own choices. Very well, she said finally. Let's proceed. The clerk handed out the final documents. Dozens of pages of legal jargon. Sign here, initial there, signature every third page. Vincent signed fast, barely skimming a word. He was ready to be done. Ready to rush back to his shiny new life with Brittany and freedom. I signed slowly, carefully, deliberately. Every stroke of my pen was a quiet celebration. This moment, the one I'd waited 3 years for. I was going to savor it. I caught a glimpse of Vincent smiling at Lorraine across the room. She nodded back, proud as ever. His phone buzzed from the hallway. Probably Brittany, texting her support. He checked his phone in court during his own divorce hearing. That's who he was. Meanwhile, Harold Whitfield was doing what good lawyers do. Reviewing every page one last time. Main agreements signed. Asset schedule signed. Settlement terms signed. Then he got to the addendum. The liability disclosure statement. I watched his face as he read it. First came the frown. Then the flicker of confusion. Then the back and forth page flipping like maybe he'd misread something. He hadn't. Harold's face went pale. He leaned in toward Vincent, trying to keep his voice low. Sir, he said urgently, we need to talk. Vincent barely glanced up. Not now. We're almost done. Sir, Harold pressed, voice sharper now. You're assuming all the debt. Vincent looked at him like he'd misheard. What? Harold pointed to the page. Papers rustling. The liability disclosure. The mortgages, the business liens, it's all listed. You're accepting full personal responsibility. For the first time, Vincent actually looked at what he'd signed. I watched his eyes skim the numbers. I watched the smug confidence drain right out of his face. House. $1.1 million owed. Market value. $850,000. Business. $480,000 in debt. Vehicles. $115,000 in lease obligations. Additional personal liabilities. $200,000. Total debt. Approximately $1.9 million. Net value of everything Vincent had just claimed? Negative $300,000. He hadn't won the jackpot. He'd inherited the bill. Vincent shot to his feet, his chair screeching across the courtroom floor. "This isn't right," he barked. His eyes darted from me to the judge to the stack of papers in front of him. "She hid this from me. This is fraud." Judge Holden's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Mr. Mercer, sit down. These numbers are fake," he snapped louder this time. "She manipulated the documents." "Mr. Mercer," the judge said again, sharper now. "Sit down." He did. Slowly. His hands were trembling. The smug grin? Gone. In its place, panic. Judge Holden glanced at the documents in front of her, then looked him dead in the eye. "Mr. Mercer, I'm reviewing the liability disclosure statement that's attached to your signed agreement. These are debts directly tied to the assets you claimed. Your house, your business, your property." She leaned forward. "Are you telling this court you don't know your own financial situation?" Silence. Watching him try to come up with an answer was like watching a cat get caught next to a broken vase. Hilarious. And utterly unbelievable. Then Harold cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I'd like to state for the record, I advised my client to conduct an independent financial review prior to this hearing. He declined. I have documentation." He pulled out the waiver. The one Vincent had signed without reading. The one that said, in clear legal language, that Harold had recommended an audit, and that Vincent had refused it. Judge Holden reviewed it briefly. "So Mr. Mercer was advised to verify these figures," she said. "He chose not to. He signed a waiver confirming that choice." She turned to Vincent. "Is that correct?" Vincent stared at the paper like it had just grown teeth. "I didn't. I thought. Is that your signature, Mr. Mercer?" Long pause. "Yes." "Then you assumed this risk voluntarily," she said, calm and final. "You had the opportunity to investigate. You chose not to. The agreement stands." Vincent turned toward me, and his voice cracked under the weight of it all. "You knew," he whispered. "You knew about all of this." I met his eyes steady and calm. "I was your bookkeeper for 11 years, Vincent. I knew about everything dash dot." I watched his face shift. Confusion, rage, betrayal, panic. Until finally, he hit the one expression I'd been waiting for. Realization. That this was no one's doing but his own. "I want to withdraw the agreement," he said, whipping back toward the judge. "I didn't understand what I was signing. This isn't fair." Judge Holden shook her head. "Mr. Mercer, you signed documents in this courtroom stating you understood and agreed to all terms. You were represented by competent counsel. You declined further review. Your wife did not hide anything." She paused. "These are your debts. Your mortgages. Your obligations. And then, the agreement is final." The gavel came down. "Mrs. Dunst, you have your settlement. Mr. Mercer, you have the assets as agreed, along with all associated liabilities. This marriage is dissolved." I stood, smoothed my dress, picked up my purse. Then I looked at Vincent one last time. He was slumped in his chair, paper spread in front of him like wreckage. The empire he thought he owned crumbling in real time. "You said you wanted everything except Tyler," I said quietly. "I gave you exactly what you asked for." Then I walked out of that courtroom, and I never looked back. In the hallway, I could still hear his voice rising, yelling at Harold, demanding answers, threatening lawsuits. Harold stayed calm. "I told you to get an audit," he said. "I have it in writing. You refused." Through the glass doors, I saw Brittany's expression shift as the shouting reached her. She looked at Vincent, really looked at him, and finally saw someone other than the successful businessman she thought she'd latched onto. She was gone before I even made it to the elevator, heels clicking fast across the marble. No goodbyes. No backward glance. Brittany's exit was even faster than her entrance into my marriage. At least she was consistent. I stepped outside into the April sunshine. The sky was clear, the air warm. Behind me, my ex-husband was still inside, yelling at his lawyer about fraud, fairness, and how none of it was his fault. But ahead of me, a new life. Smaller. Simpler. but 100% mine. The collapse came quicker than I expected. 2 weeks later, Brittany moved out of the house, packed her things in the middle of the night, left behind a note that read, "This isn't what I signed up for." The gray kitchen sat silent, empty. Within a month, Vincent tried to sell the house. But when you owe more than it's worth, you don't get offers. You get voicemails from banks and short sale suggestions from realtors. Within 2 months, the business started to fall apart. Vendors sued. The line of credit froze. The company Vincent had spent 15 years bragging about, and I had quietly held together for 11, was turning to dust. By month 3, Vincent was sitting across from bankruptcy attorneys, not boardroom partners. The man who once called himself an empire builder was now scrambling to figure out which assets he could protect. Spoiler: almost none. Lorraine's perfect son started doing rounds, calling family, showing up at doors with teary excuses and long explanations. No one knew about the debt, of course. Alexis must have hidden it. I was tricked. But the paperwork said otherwise. The mortgages? In his name. The loans? His. The gambling losses, crypto crashes, secret apartment? All his. All signed. All sealed. I heard Lorraine's annual Christmas newsletter that year was brief. Vincent is exploring new opportunities. Yeah. In debt restructuring. Everything wrapped up with the kind of poetic symmetry I couldn't have scripted better myself. Diane called about a week after the hearing. Her voice trembled. I had no idea it was this bad. "I'm so sorry, Alexis. I never meant for. I thought Vincent and I didn't say a word." No response. No comfort. No closure. Some bridges are meant to burn. Some friendships don't deserve a second chance. 20 years of history thrown away for a few compliments and empty promises from a man who used everyone he met. She tried calling 3 more times, then stopped. I imagine she's still waiting for Vincent to come around. She's going to be waiting a long time. Lorraine tried a different tactic through Tyler. "Tell your mother I didn't know about the money problems. Tell her I'm sorry for how I treated her. Tell her I want to talk." Tyler looked her straight in the eye. This woman who had packed up my things in garbage bags, who'd called me worthless, who'd never once questioned her son, and said, "Mom's busy building her life. She doesn't have time for excuses." Lorraine wanted forgiveness. I wanted peace. Guess which one of us got what we wanted? Tyler, my brilliant, observant, kind-hearted son. He saw everything clearly in the end. Not because I told him, but because he figured it out. He read the court filings. He heard his father's lies. He watched Brittany disappear. Watched Lorraine scramble. Watched the whole illusion come crashing down. One evening, about a month after the divorce was final, he sat with me in our little apartment. The sage green kitchen. The second-hand furniture. The unpacked boxes finally put away. "You waited 3 years," he said quietly. "You knew the whole time. And you just waited." I looked at him. "I wanted to make sure you were protected," I said. "Whatever happened between your dad and me, I needed to know you'd be okay." The trust fund. $520,000. Safe. Untouchable. He was quiet for a moment, processing it all. Then he hugged me. A real hug. The kind I hadn't felt from my 15-year-old son in months. The kind of hug that said, "I understand." The kind that said, "I'm proud of you." 15-year-old boys don't usually hug their moms for no reason. That moment told me everything I needed to know. I had done something right. I used my $50,000 settlement to get on my feet. First month's rent, a security deposit, some furniture that didn't sag or creak. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. And it was stable. The trust fund? Untouched. Right where it belonged. That money was Tyler's future. College. Maybe a down payment one day. A safety net no one could take from him. As for me, I finally did something I put off for over a decade. I enrolled in interior design courses at the local community college. The dream I shelved at 23 to help Vincent chase his. Now I was chasing mine. I started small. My first real client was Sandra, 52, newly divorced after 28 years of marriage. She stood in her empty apartment looking lost and asked, "How do you even begin again?" I thought about it for a second. One room at a time. One color at a time. One day at a time. We painted her kitchen sage green. She cried when it was done. Happy tears, she said. It feels like a new beginning. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Vincent showed up at my apartment. I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, the kind that doesn't come from the gym. His suit was wrinkled. The watch was gone. His eyes had shadows under them. He looked like a man who'd been through a war and lost every battle. He stood in my doorway, and for one brief second I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I didn't know it was this bad, he said, voice hoarse. I made mistakes. I get that now. But I didn't mean for this to happen. I leaned against the doorframe and looked at him. Really looked at him. This man I'd once loved. This man who'd tossed me out like old mail. This man who was now drowning in the wreckage he built. Can we talk? He asked. Maybe we could figure something out. I don't know, maybe we could. He couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say the word. Help. He was asking for help. From me. After everything. You asked for everything except Tyler, I said calmly. And you got exactly what you asked for. Alexis, please. Goodbye, Vincent. I shut the door. He stayed out there for 10 minutes. I know because I watched through the peephole while eating ice cream. Best show I'd seen in years. 5 stars. Would absolutely watch again. That night, after Tyler went to bed, I sat on the couch in our little living room and looked at the photo of my grandmother on the shelf. Her recipe box sat beside it, the one thing Lorraine almost walked off with. The one thing that mattered most. You were right about everything, Grandma, I whispered. Keep your own money. Know your worth. And never let anyone make you feel small. The apartment was quiet. Small. Nothing like the house I lived in for 15 years. But every paint color, every piece of furniture, every single decision, that was mine. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was free. Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now, you don't want to miss the best part. You'll love it. See you in the next one.